first things we've got to do is talk about perfect squares. We're simplifying square roots today. So first thing we're going to talk about is what is a perfect square. And we're just going to talk about the whole number of perfect squares right now. Okay? Well, we're not going to talk about the decimals. You know what the smallest perfect square is? 1. You know what the next perfect square is? No. 4. The next perfect square is 9. I'll just holler things out. The next one is 36. The next one is 49. The next one is 64. The next one is 81. The next one is 100. The next one after that is 121. The next one after that is 144. The next one after that is 169. The next one after that is 196. The next one after that is 225. After that is 256. After that, I'm almost certain is 289. After that is 324. After that is 361. And next one is 400. We'll finish that ... down there in a second. So between 1 and 400, does anybody know how many different perfect squares there are without having to count? 20. Next thing I'm going to talk about is why are those perfect squares? Does anybody know why? Because 1 squared is equal to what? Because 1 squared is equal to 1. Why is 4 a perfect square? Because 2 squared is equal to. Why is 9 a perfect square? 3 squared is equal to. Well, 16 is a perfect square because 4 squared is equal to it. 25 because 5 squared is equal to 25. 36 is 6 squared. 49 is what 7 squared is. 64 is what 8 squared is. 81 is what 9 squared is. 100 is what 10 squared is. 121 is what 11 squared is. 144 is what 12 squared is. 169 is what 13 squared is. 196 is what 14 squared is. 225 is what 15 squared is. 256 is what 16 squared is. 289 is what 17 squared is. 324 is what 18 squared is. 361 is what 19 squared is. And 400 is what 20 squared is. Now, basically, the reason they're all going to be perfect squares is because that's what a squared is, right? Okay. And that would give us our perfect square. You're right, there may be 19 because I just said 20 because it was 1 to 20, but I think actually when you count it, there's 19 in there. No, there's 20. Now, why are we doing all this? Why is this a big deal? Well, for this reason. Guys, we are going to talk about this right here. Square root of x is what we're dealing with. That is a square root. What it means is square root of x, or radical x, is the way you say it. However, when you read it to yourself, that's what I want you to read to yourself. When you read this to yourself, it should read, what number could I square or multiply times itself and get x as the answer? That is what that means. And at first, I'm sure all of you are going to be like, come on, I've been doing this forever. Okay. That's fine. There's 20 numbers you're going to do real well with. And what I'm saying is, when you see 3 times 4, do you say to yourself, well, that's what 3 4s added together is? Do you define it like, no, you just 3 times 4, what do you tell yourself? 12. You guys have gotten kind of to where you know what a square root is, but the thing about it is, there's very few of those, a very small percentage that you can answer just by looking at it. So what we're going to talk about is how we're going to simplify those. And I'm going to give you steps. I'm not going to let you use your calculators for finding the answer. You're going to have to show your steps, exactly how I tell you to do them. Because this will give you a broader understanding of what a square root is. Now, everybody got that? It will be posted if you need to. What we're going to do here is, let's say our perfect square was x. What I'm going to talk about here is the square root of x. What would the square root of 1 equal? What number could I square and get 1 as an answer? What would the square root of 4 be? What number could you multiply by itself and get 4 as an answer? 2. Great. How about square root of 9? 3 is the number you can multiply by itself. Do you notice that when I answer the question, what happens to my square root sign? It goes away. Just as when I say, what's 3 times 4? You don't write 12 times something. You just write what? 12. Square root is an operation. Once you answer the operation or you answer the question, the operation is gone. This is a mistake. When we simplify, everybody wants to leave the square root on there. Well, if you answer the question's gone, isn't it? But nobody questions when I say 10 divided by 2, the answer is what? 10 divided by 2 is what? 5. You don't put 5 divided by, do you? Or 5 divided by 2 again. The answer is just 5. So if you answer the question, what number could I square and get 16 as an answer? What would the answer be? The number 4. What number could I square and get 25 as an answer? Very good. You guys are good at this. What number could I square and get 36 as an answer? Good. What number could I square and get 49 as an answer? Good. What number could I square and get 64 as an answer? What number could I square and get 81 as an answer? What number could I square and get 100 as an answer? What number could I square and get 121 as an answer? What number could I square and get 144 as an answer? What number could I square and get 169 as an answer? What number could I square and get 196 as an answer? Awesome. What number could I square and get 225 as an answer? Isn't this fun? What number could I square and get 256 as an answer? What number could I square and get 289 as an answer? What number could I square and get 324 as an answer? What number could I square and get 361 as an answer? What number could I square and get 400 as the answer? Man, square roots are easy, right? But I want you to think about something. Between the numbers 1 and 400, how many easy square roots are there, or questions you can answer? Huh? Without a calculator in your head. Let me ask you, okay, let me rephrase. How about this? You guys know what the square root of 20 is? Hey, listen to me. You guys know what the square root of 20 is? What is it? Tell me. The square root of 20. Well, 20 is an easy number, right? What about the square root of 40? You guys can't tell me exactly what the square root of 40 is? Get the headphone out of your ear. Every day. What's the square root of 50? It's not half of it. What about the square root of 13? Square root of 65. Square root of 99. Square root of 98. Square root of 97. What about square root of 81? Hey, you can answer that. What about square root of 36? Look at that. Square root of 100. So I asked my question again. Between the whole numbers of 1 and 400, how many if you square root each of those numbers, how many can you answer? 20 of them. The 20 we just did, right? So you guys are real good at 20 out of 400 of them. Is that the grade you want to make on a test? No. So if there's 20 we can do easy, how many are there we can't? 380. I'd say we need to figure out the other 380. Agreed? That's the thing. You guys have been doing square roots for a while, but like I said, 3 times 4, you guys just say 12. Square root of 9, you just say 3. You don't even think about it probably almost anymore how you're getting it. I mean, it's hard to think square root of 20. What in the world decimal would that be? All I can tell you for sure is that's between 4 and 5. Because the square root of 16 is 4, and the square root of 25 is what? 5. So the square root of 20 has got to be in between those two, right? So, but the problem is anytime you get one you can't get, you get a non-terminating, non-repeating decimal irrational number. So you can't write it exactly. So what we do is we simplify it. We get as much outside of that square root sign as we can. And that's called simplifying a square root, which is basically what we're going to learn steps how to do. And yes, it will get boring on how, what's the word? Tedious my steps will get here. Because I'm trying to explain everything to where you're sitting at home. God, it confused me why I did that. You've got something to refer to, right? Okay, your first step. is to ask yourself the question. And are we okay? I'm going to talk about simplifying square root of x, some number underneath there. So I'm going to be referring x, and I'm talking about the what? Number underneath the square root sign, right? So my first question I want you to ask yourself is x a perfect square? Question mark. So write this down. I want you to write everything down like I do. The example we're going to do, square root of 20. I'm not asking you to answer that question yet. We're going to write down our steps, what we do here. Is x a perfect square? If your answer is yes, you got an easy problem. Evaluate it. You can answer that question, right? So if it was like 9, if it was 9 under the square root, you guys would know, oh, hey, the answer is what? 3. Okay, you're done. You simplified it. It was a perfect square. But most of what these steps are for when the answer is what? No. If your answer is no, go to step 2. What is our answer over here in our example? Square root of 20. Is the number under the square root, our x here is what? 20. Is that a perfect square? Look at your list. Not on there, is it? So our answer? No. So, as I said, you go to step 2. Step 2. Is the largest perfect square, what is the largest perfect square that is a factor of x? What does factor mean? Hello. Come on, what's a fact? Give me a factor of 8. 2. Why was that a factor? It divides into it evenly, right? Anytime you forget a word like that, do what I just did. Think of an easy number and say, what's a factor of it? And you can probably answer, oh, that's what it is. It's numbers that divide into it evenly, right? It's like the factors of 8 are what? 1, 2, 4, and 8. Remember when you used to have to do that and write commas? Oh, wasn't that bad. But for most numbers, smaller numbers, you kind of know them already, don't you? So all you have to do is think of the factors of it and say, now what's a key word here? What is the largest perfect square? We're talking about square root of 20. And what we're going to do is we're going to call that our perfect square factor, PSF. How about that? Is that okay? So we don't have to write down a bunch of words? So let's look at 20. Obviously, 25 won't go into 20 evenly, will it? Will 16? Will 9? Will 4? 4 will divide into it evenly. It will, won't it? So what's our perfect square factor here? 4. And just so if we were thinking of, your factors of 20, it would be 1, what? 2, 4, 5, and 10, and 20, right? And 4 was the one that worked, wasn't it? So our perfect square factor is 4. And remember, this is going to happen much faster when you're doing a problem. I'm going slow because we're writing it down, right? So it seems harder and lengthier than when you just what'll happen is if you'll go through these steps about 5 or 6 times, read them to yourself every time, you won't have to do it anymore. It'll just be kind of ingrained into your head, and you'll go through these steps. But what I like about this, instead of some of your kind of shortcuts that you've probably been taught to do this before, making a tree and all that stuff, is this helps you understand the concept of what you're doing, of a radical, of a square root. Radical's another name, is the sign. But okay. Next thing, you ask yourself another question. Once you found that perfect square factor, okay, is your perfect square factor 1? PSF, right? If the answer is yes, the square root is simplified and you are done. Because not every square root of 13, that can't be simplified anymore because the largest perfect square, it's a factor of it, is 1. It's because it's a prime number, right? Just 1 and 13 go into it. And there's no reason factoring out a square root of 1. Because square root of 1 is 1. 1 times that, you're going to have the same thing, right? So not, like I said, not all of them will factor. And you just would write underneath simplified. It's already simplified. However, if your answer is no, go to step 4. Well, for our example, we've got square root of 20. What is our perfect square factor? So what's the answer? Is it yes or no? Is your PCF perfect square factor 1? No, it is not. So I'll go to step 4. Step 4, you're going to split square root of x into a valid multiplication expression of 2 square roots using your perfect square factor, Another way you could say this, what we're going to do, we're going to factor out the PSF. As you see, I've got square root of x is going to be split up into your perfect square factor times y, and I'm saying y is what you have to multiply your perfect square factor by to get x. You know, factoring it out. You guys remember factoring? You could factor 12 into 3 times 4, couldn't you? So what was our perfect square factor here? So square root of 4 times, well, what did we say? Times, we have to, this has to, when you multiply these back together, you have to be able to get 20 as an answer. So what needs to be underneath the other square root? Because 4 times 5 is 20, right? So you guys see how you broke that up? That makes sense? And don't write this down, but there's a bunch of, and I guess you can if you want, but I'll zoom in here. Square root of 20. There's nothing that says I can't break that up into the square root of 1 times square root of 20, right? Square root of 1. I could also break it up into square root of 2 times square root of what? See how you're just factoring it? Thing about it is, these don't really do you any good. You just get back to square root of 20. Okay? Do you see what doesn't do you any good? Because there's no perfect square there. Make sense? Why does this do us some good? Because we can simplify the square root. You can. We're left with right now Square root of 4 times square root of 5. Which of those two square roots can I simplify? Which one can you answer the question? What number could you square and get 4 as an answer? That becomes 2. However, do you know the answer to the square root of 5? Can you answer that question? So it stays square root of 5. Do you see how when I answered the question, what went away? What was the difference between square root of 4 and 2? When I answered what number could I square and get 4 as an answer, the answer is just 2, not square root of 2. For some reason, when people do this, they want to leave the square root on there. And that's what I was talking about. When you say 10 divided by 2 is equal to 5, you don't say 10 divided by 2 is equal to 5 divided by 2, do you? You don't keep dividing by 2, do you? No. Same thing here. You answer the question, what number could you square and get 4 as an answer? The answer to that question is 2. So when you answer it, you don't need the question anymore, because when it's all said and done, see that little square root sign? That's a question written down in symbol form, just as addition is. When you say 4 plus 5, aren't I saying, hey, if I have 4 and I add 5 to it, what do I get? Isn't that what that plus, the plus is a question. The answer to that question is 9, right? This is a question as well. So, 2 square roots of 5. Do you see why this right here does us more good than these down here did? I couldn't simplify these anymore, could I? This one, though, I can't multiply things outside times things inside. So I got as much out from under the square root as I could. I simplified it. Broke it down as much as you could. Get as much out of that square root as you can. Your last step, if what's left under the square root has a perfect square factor of 1, then you're done. If not, repeat with what's under the square root. If you don't pick the largest square root that's a factor of it, you'll have to keep breaking it down. And sometimes that's the easier way to do square root of 360. If you know 4 will go into it, maybe you do 4, get the 2 out. Then break it down, break it down into smaller numbers. Some people like doing that, but you need to show your steps doing that every time. So if we had 2 square roots of 5, tell me right there, what's the PSF of 5 is equal to what? What's the perfect square factor of 5? Isn't it 1? Would you guys agree? The large perfect square root, a factor of 5 is 1. So it's what? It's simplified, and you are done. So in essence, all we're doing is just trying to get as much out from underneath that square root sign as we can every time. So the only thing that we can get out from under square roots are perfect squares. So we're going to factor it into a product of perfect squares as much as we can, hopefully using the biggest, and then we'll just have one thing out and then some left under. Make sense? I'll do another example over here to the left. If it was square root of 225, you're at 15 underneath it. You simplified it. You can answer the question. Well, yeah, that's the answer, isn't it? You see what I'm saying? I mean, that's what you're doing when you, what's simpler? Hey, I'll give you I'll sell you this box for square root of $225. Or to say, I'll sell you this box for $15. You see what I mean? It's much simpler to say what? $15, right? So you're still simplifying. It's just, you don't think of it like that. They think of simplified, it's got to be some hard math expression, right? You're still simplifying. You're just giving it in a simpler form. So how about we go square root of Think of a good one here. 150. Oh, big number. Coach Stump's mean. First step says what? You guys have got it in front of you. I'm zoomed in. Is the number under our square root sign a perfect square? No, it's not. So I go on to what? Step 2. Because I see this happen all the time. People will skip that question and they'll break it down and you'll be like square root of 121. They'll get all confused. There's no perfect squares or a factor of it. It's simplified. No, 121 is a perfect square. It's 11. You see what I mean? Or they'll break it down to, square root of 8 times square root of 8, then, and just keep breaking it down and do it a lot more work than they need to. But our answer is no. So we've got to find our perfect square factor. And then we're going to break it up. So right now, you could do this, couldn't you? Oh, pink's for perfect square factor, so we'll use a different color. I'll just use the same. We know what we're going to try to do is break this up. And you're nuts if you don't think I want to see that every time, because I know there's calculators that'll do this for you. That's what you're going to do every time, isn't it? I just kind of want you to this point. So first, find the perfect square factor. Largest perfect square, it's a factor of 150. It will pop into some of you's heads pretty fast. Some of you it won't. So when you're looking at this, and this is practice for bigger numbers, does anybody know the possibility? Can a number bigger than 150 be a factor of it? So right there, we know for sure it's got to be all the ones what? Smaller than 150, doesn't it? But answer me this. Other than itself, what's the largest number? It's a factor of 20. 10, right? Other than itself, what's the largest number? Factor of 40? 20. Other than itself, what's the largest per square? It's a factor of 60. Other than itself, what's the largest number? It's a factor of 100. So the largest number other than itself, it's always a factor of it, is what of that number? Half of it. So why start dividing in your calculator 144, 121, 81, and 100? When you know that the biggest number besides itself that'll go into it, is less than what? Half of it. So with these big numbers, don't start at the number, start at what? And what is half of that number? So, first number to start with, and I know some of you can probably see it in your head right now. That's fine. I get it. But I'm going to do each one. How about 64? Go 150. For some of you that aren't real good at seeing, multiplication in your head, you're probably going to have to use a calculator for a while. 150 divided by 64. Does it come out even? So, I know right now, 64 doesn't work, does it? What's the next one? No, what's the next perfect square down? 49. What's the largest perfect square? That's a factor of 150. So we're starting at think about it. Look, and here's the funny thing, there's only, 8 numbers to try, 64 down? For a number as big as 75 or as 150, that's not a whole lot, is it? So it's not as bad as you think. 150 divided by 49 equals, does it come out even? Not even close. Well said. So that's not a factor of it. How about 150 divided by 36? Nope. And remember, it's not as bad as it looks. I'm going slow, aren't I? 150 divided by, what's the next one down? And then probably comes, some of you who didn't see it go, oh, well, gosh, of course. That's $1.50. That's 6/4, right? There it is. That's the largest perfect square that's a factor of it. Is what? 25. So our perfect square factor down here is what? 25. So I'm going to break this up into 25 times. Well, I have to get that back as an answer. What would I have in here? 25 times 6. You have to be able, when you go back up, get that as an answer. You guys understand that you're factoring it? Well, I can answer that question. That's the whole reason I did that, right? What is the square root of 25? Square root of what? Now, if I had the largest perfect square, I'm done. What's the largest perfect square? It's a factor of 6. 3 is not a perfect square. Remember, what's the largest perfect square that's a factor of 6? Are either of those perfect squares? 1. See, you guys are so set into, you're just ingrained into reducing fractions in your head. You see 6 and you think, it has factors. It does, but none of them are perfect squares. See, we're thinking about perfect squares here. And that's probably the biggest sense of confusion that you get. But see, there's no other perfect square besides 1 I can factor out. So I've got as much outside of that thing as I can, don't I? Does everybody understand that? Okay. So these are the type of problems you're going to do. Now, here's what I want you to do. Up at the top or somewhere, I want you to write your perfect squares. I don't know, you can do them off to the left if you want. Or write them on a sheet of paper and have them off to the side where you can check them every time. Right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat so I don't have to write everything down. And have that with you. Guys, don't put your stuff up yet. We've got 7 minutes. That's an eternity. I'm going to erase this because I don't want it on my... You know what I'm going to do here? I'm going to write my ones 1 through. I'm going to make a... Put it on my desktop. Name it Perfect Squares. You know what you could also do? Have your Chromebook out in front of you with all the perfect squares up, couldn't you? So for our first one here, it's not fair that I can do this and you can't, but maybe one day we'll all have a surface. Oh gosh, no. About 4 times the price. Because it's a full computer. I mean, you can get it for about 800. Okay, here we are. Let's worry about this one. Okay, number 1. First question, is the number underneath the square root sign a perfect square? Oh, it is. It's on the list right there, isn't it? What's the square root of 64? You're done. Okay, go on to the next one. No, I don't want to flatten that. Duplicate. And by the way, I haven't changed it yet, but this won't be due tomorrow. Okay? Okay, this one. Is the number underneath the square root sign a perfect square? 200's not on our list, is it? It's right here somewhere. Everyone agree? Okay. So the answer is no, so I know I'm going to do what? I'm going to split it up into square root, and I have to find a perfect square factor. Think I want you guys to do it like this every time? Absolutely. Aren't I mean? Okay. Start at half of it, right? Instead of doing, what's half of 200? Well, looky there. That's where we start, and that's a perfect square, isn't it? So what's the largest perfect square? It's a factor of it. 100. How would I split it up into 200? 100 times what? And write the square roots. Don't get lazy and just write 100 times 2. It drives me nuts. Write your 2 square roots. Because I'd love to trade you $100 for I'll give you a square root of $100 every day of the week and twice on Sunday. Okay? It's not the same thing. What is the square root of 100? Does the other stay the same? What's the largest perfect square? It's a factor of 2? 1. You're done. So you see how this isn't quite as bad as one might seem? It can be. It can also get a little frustrating sometimes. You know what I ought to do? If I was a really nice teacher, I would have planted a perfect square on every single one and printed them out that way. Like I have here. I don't know if it'd print out very good. It'd be pretty small. But these are just the ones we want in 400. There's more of them, isn't there? If you get a number bigger than 400, you're probably going to have to put into your calculator and press the square root button, aren't you? Is our number underneath the square root sign a perfect square here? No, it is not. 343 is right in between here. So I got to start at half of it. What's half of 343? It's 171.5. Stop. You don't have to write this part down, so you don't need to mess with your stuff. So, do you guys think 169 is going to go into that evenly? I mean, guys, if you know it, you know, if 171 goes into it evenly, a number 3 less than it isn't going to. Agreed? 144. Does 4 times anything get you a 3 at the end? Can you think of a number you multiply times 4 and you see you can cut your time by looking at the ones place and looking at the ones place of your perfect square. There is no number that 4 times it gets you 3 at the end, is there? 1. There is one for that. So you better try it. 343 divided by 121. Doesn't work. Is 100 going to go into 343 evenly? No. Do you see how you can make life a little bit easier on yourself? Okay. How about 343 divided by 81? Nope. Doesn't work. 343 divided by 64. Remember, you know, 4 times nothing gets you a 3. So how about 343 divided by 49? Oh, you never would have guessed that, would you? But did we really have to go through that many? No. So your perfect square factor is 49. And you know 49 times 7. 7 square roots of 7 is your answer. I'll post this. Good job, guys. Be ready to work tomorrow.